start with the psychology paper 3. Now the very first question talks about the definition of altruism, which by definition means helping others without any personal interest. So 1 would be the correct answer. The next question talks about the fluid intelligence and the crystallized intelligence. So if you look onto the curve, the crystallized intelligence continuously increases with age, that is with the experiences. However, the fluid intelligence reaches its peak during the adulthood and then it starts to decline. So you have both the statements is correct, but they are not mutually dependent. So 2 would be the correct answer. The next question talks about the multiple correlation. Here it's important to read the question carefully because you are being asked about multiple correlation. If it was bivariate correlation, the range would be -1 to +1. For multiple correlation, the range varies from 0 to 1. So 3 would be the correct answer. Now next question is, you have to match the concept with the correct explanation. So there are various kinds of representation. The commonly talked about is the viewer centered and the object centered. Under the viewer centered, we talk about how the individual stores the way the object looks to him or her. So what the individual observes is the viewer centered. However, under object centered, we talk about the individual who is storing the representation of the object, and that is independent of the appearance of the object. So you have 3 that goes with 1 and you have A that goes with 3. Then you have structuralism. Structuralism is the simple sensations that conceive the building block. And finally the constructivist approach that talks about the cognitive understanding. So these are the correct matches for this question. The next topic, it's on the Gibson's theory of perception that talks about we perceive the environment and we do not need the aid of complex thought processes for the same. So 1 would be the correct answer for this. The next question talks about the Bandura's observational learning, and under that the correct order is, first there is attention, you try to retain, there is rehearsal, and finally a corrective action that is done. So 1 would be the correct answer for this question. The next question talks about the assertion reason. Now this is the Levin's avoidance concept that is being talked about, and under the Levin's avoidance conflict, he explains that these conflicts are more stable because the opposing forces tend to remain in a state of equilibrium. So he gave 3 types of conflicts: the approach avoidance, the approach and the avoidance. And under the avoidance he said it's kind of stable because the opposing forces make this in equilibrium. So both the statements are correct and reason correctly explains it. So 1 would be the correct answer. The next question is matching the concept with the type of expression that would be revealed. So under an intrinsic motivation means I have a strong will to do it and that's coming from within. So I want to go to swimming every day because I just like to do it and I take out the time from my busy schedule, would be a kind of intrinsic motivation. Then you have the achievement motivation where you are trying to accomplish a difficult task and therefore that's an achievement motivation. Self-handicapping means you are trying to do something but you are resisting yourself. So I am really not feeling too good, I may not be able to perform well. So you are resisting yourself from doing something, that's self-handicapping. And the last is sensation seeking, that means you want to do it irrespective of the reward or the final outcome. So you love to drive fast irrespective of the fact that you might hit, you want to drive fast. So that is sensation seeking or pleasure seeking. So those are the correct matches. The next is the question on identity status of an individual who are exploring the alternatives in an effort to find the value as goals to guide their life is the definition for moratorium, identity moratorium. So identity moratorium is the correct answer. Note that similar question on identity diffusion and foreclosures was asked in 2016-17 again. So this is an important section, be very particular with this section. So refer it carefully. The next is anomaly of XXY is seen in Klinefelter syndrome. So 1 is the correct answer. So just go on and revise all the anomalies XXY and so on. So you have Klinefelter syndrome for this. The next is Again a very important question, which of the following is associated with memory for emotionally charged events? Now amygdala and hippocampus are the two major centers which are associated with the memory for emotionally charged events. Now many of the students got confused with hypothalamus here and marked it incorrectly. However, the correct answer here would be C only. So you have C only as the correct choice. The next question talks about the definition or the approach that the cognitive developmental approach talks about. So it says that development is a result of individuals' action and participation in the process of development, and it's an interaction with the environmental influences. So 4 would be the correct answer here, a direct definition. Now next question, it's important to understand the difference between depersonalization and derealization. When the person feels above his physical body, that's a depersonalization. So if you come on to this diagram, you can clearly understand depersonalization is where a person experiences detachment from his own self. However, under derealization, the person experiences detachment from the entire world. So therefore, the correct answer here would be depersonalization. A confusing question, a very important point to remember. So all the differences would be available at Doorstep Tutor, you can refer that. Now next is humanistic approach. Talks about optimistic idea about human nature, talks about personal responsibilities and focuses on present more than the past. However, it does not talk about believing in fate. So you have A, B and C as the correct approaches under humanistic approach. So A, B and C would be the correct answer. The next question is, Chomsky's concept worked around syntax formation, transformational grammar, and he called himself a Cartesian linguistic. However, he did not develop the artificial language JSK. So you have A, B and C as the correct answers here. Now next question talks about the REM sleep. REM sleep increases after learning. If there is improper or deficient REM sleep, it would interfere with your learning. So both of those are correct. And again, if there is a proper REM sleep, the performance is said to increase after a proper REM sleep. So all of these three statements are correct. You can refer the sleep cycles and the classes on sleep that we have already covered for more details on it. So all the three statements would be correct here. The next question is assertion reason. Managers make judgment about employees' disposition in the various situations. So this talks about the attribution theory, and these inferences are drawn based on the observation. So reason correctly explains the assertion. Both of the statements are correct, and this is an idea from the attribution theory. So you have 1 as the correct answer. Now next is, you have to find out the decreasing order in terms of strength of the relationship as defined by common variance. So the coefficient, the correlation coefficient, if we talk about the absolute value, just take out the absolute value. So be it +1 or -1, we are talking about the extreme values. So those would have the highest distance. So you would have -8. So that would be 0.8, then 0.7, 0.4 and 0.5 and 0.4 would be the correct sequence, because we are talking about the absolute distance from the 0, and therefore you have 1 as the correct answer here. Now next question is, this is a statement that supports the Premack's principle, which says a person goes for more rewarding experiences in order to achieve the goal. So the mother tells a child to eat vegetable before getting the dessert. So dessert for the child could be more rewarding and therefore would be offered after the child consumes the vegetable. So you have Premack principle that works. So 3 would be the correct answer here. Now next question is, teacher's motivation style determines the student's motivation for reading. That's correct. And to enhance this, the teacher is trying to offer reward and feedback. So reason correctly explains the assertion, and both the statements are correct. So you have 1 as the correct answer here. Talking about the Craig and Tulwing's cycle, the correct explanation is the physical action, then you have the acoustic or the phenomics, and finally the semantic or based on understanding. So you have the structural, phenomics and semantics that work. So 2 would be the correct answer. The next question is DSM 3. Now DSM 3 was multilingual. it introduced the coding system, and it used experimental data and field trials. However, there was proposition to delete the word neurosis, but later on due to political issues it was taken back. So B is not the correct choice. You have A, C and D as the correct options here. The next is Jensen explained the percent of variance in intelligence by genetic factor, that was around 80 to 90%. Now this is important because Jensen predominantly believed in heredity and genetics as a major contributing factor to intelligence, and 3 is the correct answer here. Now next is Westerners focus on the figures while viewing the scene as much less on the ground, while the East Asians pay more attention to the overall context, and that is due to the cultural differences that the cultural affects it. So you have the reason which clearly explains the assertion, and both the statements are correct. So 1 would be the correct choice. And finally the last question, auto-shaping involves stimulus learning, that's correct, and some behaviors are innate responses to the stimulus related properties, that's again correct, and explains the auto-shaping. Now under auto-shaping what is done, a lighted key is shown to the pigeon and then the food is given. So what happens is initially the pigeon goes for food, but later on the pigeon believes that this lighted key is also a food and starts to peck it. So that is a kind of innate response that is generated, and the pigeon is unable to distinguish from the real unconditioned stimuli. So both the statements are correct, and reason correctly explains the assertion. So with this we cover the 25 questions. We will be covering the next 25 questions in the upcoming class. So stay tuned. Have a very good day ahead.